Christi Jo was born September 6, 1965. Her parents divorced when she was young, so she grew up with her mother, stepfather, a sister, a brother, and 3 stepbrothers. She graduated high school in 1983, and shortly after that she moved to live with her grandmother, that would be her dad's mom, in Gothenburg, Nebraska. This is where she met and married Mark Nichols. At the time she was married, she was 19 years old. When she went missing, she was 22. She was reported missing on December 11th of 1987 and is presumed to have been murdered the day before, which was December 10th, 1987. Christi is described as being proud of and devoted to her children, with a life that centered around her husband and children. She was a mother of 2, Lindsay, who was born December of 1984, and Preston, who was born April of 1986. Christi was said to have been a victim of domestic violence and abuse. In the weeks before her murder, she was seen in the emergency room. She also had started seeing a domestic violence counselor and even went to a nearby town to meet with a divorce attorney. So, a little backstory on this. She was new to the town, having moved in with her grandmother there shortly after high school. Her husband, however, appears to have been born and raised there and was definitely, entrenched in the community. It seems that his family was friends with the police chief, and the emergency room doctor was the police chief's wife. This is what prompted her to find an attorney in a neighboring town in the hopes that her husband would not find out that she was planning to divorce him and leave. And this is where we see a lot of strange twists and turns with this case. Apparently, the divorce attorney contacted the police chief to report the domestic violence because it is a crime. Further, the domestic violence counselor who set up the appointment with her decided it would be a good idea to meet with her in the police chief's office. So, of course, this information all got back to her husband. Some of the incidents that were detailed in the various sources that I researched said that he had broken her thumb, that she was seen with severe bruising on her side, and she also reported to family members that he had choked her and stabbed the wall above her head, which she was very concerned because her child had come into the room, and so she witnessed all that had taken place. He also monitored all of her phone calls. Now, his uncle owned a bar in the town called Pete's Place, and she is said to have been employed there, which to me doesn't seem like a coincidence. He seemed to have kept very close tabs on her. He seemed to have enlisted the help of the police chief in doing this. Needless to say, when he found out that she had contacted a domestic violence counselor and divorce attorney, he was not happy. He took the children to his mother's house and dropped them off. Now, when she got home from work ahead of him, the grandmother of the children, would not release the children to her. So she contacted the police chief, and you can kind of guess how far that went. He refused to intervene and stated that the husband had every right to keep the children from her. Again, the husband wasn't there, so the mother would have had no right to keep the children. The police chief went on and harassed her on several different occasions and did admit to as much when speaking with Christi Jo's mom. Now, the ER doctor, as I mentioned, was the wife of the police chief, and she was there when Christi came in with a broken thumb. She said that Christi was, quote, acting like a scared rabbit, if you will. She's never been one for great eye contact or been very verbal. She obviously wasn't telling me everything either. Mark was in the hallway nearby, and I couldn't, looking back, really tell if it was reassuring for her to have Mark there or not. Okay, so jumping back forward here now. When he found out that she had contacted the domestic violence counselor and took the children, he later presented her with a list of demands that she would have to meet in order for him and the children to return home. Now, these were some really crazy off-the-wall things that he was insisting on. She was only able to drive her car a certain number of miles. He removed her name from all bank accounts so she would have no access to money. She was not allowed to take the children anywhere. She was not allowed to meet with a counselor, and she was not allowed to obtain a divorce. Also, he told her that if she left town, she would be arrested. And knowing that the police chief was in this guy's back pocket, she pretty much assumed that that would actually take place if she did so. So Christi did verbally agree to these demands, though in speaking with family members, she made it pretty clear that she had no intention of following through with the insanity. So he came home with the children, and the night that she apparently was murdered, they went out on the town. Now, it's been suggested that he was trying to give the appearance that they had reconciled and that everything was, happy in their relationship. So they went shopping. They took the kids out for pizza and to see Santa Claus. Then they took the kids home and hired a sitter while they went to the bar to play pool. Now, this would be the same bar where she worked, and his uncle was present at the time. The uncle says that it was obvious that things were stressful between them, while Mark himself says that there was a, quote, positive attitude, and that they were joking around and having fun. And I'm sure you can tell which of those two statements seems most likely. Then after they left the bar, they stopped at a convenience store. Now here the clerk says that Christi Jo appeared very nervous, and she kind of stuck close to the cashier and just made small talk with him while her husband shopped. So that seems a bit odd. Now when he returned home, the babysitter reports that she never saw or heard Christi enter the home, and that she did speak to the husband for, I think they said about 10 minutes, give or take. He claims that she had entered the house before him and went straight to her room. But this doesn't make a lot of sense because the babysitter was in the living room and would have heard the front door. So she would have heard Christi Jo, but she says that she did not. So unless Christi Jo walked through the front door without opening it, it seems a little strange that she wouldn't have seen or heard her come in. This statement also seems suspicious because he said that she went in and went straight to bed. But then later when he was interrogated, he said that they were up arguing until 2 o'clock in the morning. That would also seem to contradict his statements of a positive attitude and joking around at the bar. If that was the case, why would they come home and argue? There were numerous people in the town who were aware that he was abusive. Even the divorce attorney said she looked as if she had been beaten up. So anyway, so he says that she went straight to sleep, and then later says that they argued until 2 a.m., and then he fell asleep. Now, I did find one source on the Find a Grave website that says he told police he woke up in the middle of the night and saw her sleeping on the floor, covered in blood. I would think at that point you would jump up and, try to render aid, call 911, something. If his story is to be believed, what he actually did at that point was go back to sleep, because then he said that the children woke him up at 7 o'clock. Now, I couldn't find any other sources that corroborated that statement, so I just want to put that disclaimer in there. But that was listed as something that he apparently must have said to the police. So the next morning, he got a phone call from Christi Jo's mother and said that she couldn't come to the phone. She wasn't feeling well and was in bed. Now, her mother found this odd, and so she contacted another friend who was a social worker and asked her to call the house. He told that woman that Christi was out shopping, and that's why she couldn't come to the phone. You can kind of see there the mother's intuition, or the woman's intuition, I guess. She just knew that something didn't seem right. So shortly after the phone calls, he showed up at Christi Jo's grandma's house and asked her to watch the children. The grandma said that he was, I don't know, I guess you would say acting kind of odd. He said that he was going to look for her, but didn't seem to be upset. Never said, hey, have you seen her? Anything like that. And he was gone for approximately 2.5 hours, during which time he claims that he was driving around town looking for her. Now, based on maps that I've seen of the town, it's about 1 mile by 2 miles. Not counting like the outlying rural areas. So I would think it wouldn't take 2 hours to drive around town. But for sure, if you were driving around town, people would have seen you. And yet everyone that they talked to said they did not see him driving around town, which would also mean he didn't knock on any doors, ask any of their friends or relatives, hey, have you seen her? He says that he was just driving past businesses to see if he could see her coming out. It sounds, kind of inadequate if you're looking for someone, that you wouldn't even exit the vehicle or talk to any people. So anyway, he did ultimately end up at the police station and filed a missing persons report, but he told the police that she had left with another man and went to North Platte. After doing this, it seems that he cleaned out both cars, forged her signatures on the titles of the cars, and sold them. He also boxed up all her clothing and moved out of his house that day. Now, later there was mention of a letter she supposedly had written to another man, but the man's name was not on the letter, and it was said to have been found on the floor of her car. Now, I don't know if this is something that he found when he was cleaning out the cars to illegally sell them, for which he was never charged, of course, or if this was something that was found at a later time. I also couldn't find any information on whether they had done handwriting analysis. It seems to me if she wrote the letter, she knows the man's name, and it would have been on there. The whole thing was just very suspicious. There was also very little media coverage, and it seems like that was, again, a case of the police chief dropping the ball. He waited, I guess, about a week to have them put anything in the newspaper about her disappearance, and it really was kind of leading people to believe more that she was a runaway wife than, the victim of a kidnapping or a murder. At some point, the police chief said that he had heard from 3 people in North Platte who saw her after she had disappeared. Another odd twist with this case is that a teenager at some point came forward and said that he had been hanging out at the park next to their house and saw Mark around back of the house that night near his truck. And when he looked up and Mark realized that he had seen him, he came charging toward the teenager and yelling at him. So the teenager took off. He was, fearful. The whole thing just seems very strange. Now, Mark, who said that he was asleep when she left, was able to tell the police what she took with her. So that's kind of weird. He said that she took her suitcase and her purse and was actually able to list the contents of both bags 100% perfectly. The suitcase apparently contained jeans, a sweatshirt, a bra, and a jacket. Now, I'm sure that you could get a lot more in there than that. And then her purse, he said, had a lighter, book of matches, a pen, a hairbrush, lipstick, face cream, a mirror, and one piece of gum. Oddly, these items were found 3 months later at a rest stop in a town called Maxwell that's approximately halfway between Gothenburg and North Platte. Now, those two cities are, it said, about 35 miles apart, so about a half-hour drive or less. Another strange thing is that she did not take her driver's license. She did not take her diamond jewelry. She did not pick up her paycheck. She did not notify any family members. And both cars were still in the driveway because he sold those after she disappeared. So I'm not sure how she got to Maxwell, but I would suspect that she probably had never been there at all. Now, I couldn't tell you what's in my own purse. So it seems very strange. Like, I know he's a controlling guy, but for him to have been asleep and know exactly what is in the suitcase and the purse and know that she took those items with her is quite a feat. So it actually ended up being her family who organized all the searches. They were able to get hundreds of volunteers to participate. Mark and his family members did not participate. And again, there was very little media coverage. I think it said that there was one second article in the paper about her case, and it was almost a month after she had gone missing. Now, her aunt, I believe this was her father's sister, even went so far as to earn her private investigator license so that she could follow up leads on the case. Initially, the family had to resort to hiring a private detective to look into the case, and again, I would assume this is because the police were not doing much of anything, if anything at all. So this private investigator, he found blood in the bedroom underneath a laundry basket and also in the trunk of Mark's car. Isn't that strange? Now, the different sources that I read said that he claimed that this was, from her time of the month. But, so that seems a really odd place for that type of blood to be found in the trunk of his car. Apparently at some point they did test it for DNA and found out A, that it was actual real blood, and B, that it was Christie's. Now, it was said that it was not a large enough amount of blood to have indicated a, murder. But there obviously are ways that you can murder someone without them bleeding heavily. Strangulation would be one. And magically, he had been apparently attempting to strangle her on at least one previous occasion. So, if the police had been investigating it properly, I think they would have been the ones to find the blood in his car and in their room. Now, at some point, the State Patrol became involved in the case, investigating or whatnot. According to her family, they think that if the state patrol had been given the case immediately, it would have been solved. So there seems to be, every indication that the ball was dropped in Gothenburg. Another really strange thing that I came across is that there was some kind of interview of Mark at a later time, and I'm thinking it was for Unsolved Mystery Show. During whatever interview it was, the sources said that he was, quote, giggling and relaying how he had heard a rumor that people were saying he had dismembered her and put her in garbage bags and left her at the dump. Not sure why he found that amusing. He said that one really, quote, got to him. And I also read that during this time there was a major construction project apparently going on where they were putting an overpass above, I think it said some train tracks. And his parents also, within a few days after this happened, were pouring concrete on their land. Now, a worker, it said, and I don't know if this was a worker on the construction project or a worker who was pouring the concrete for Mark's parents, said that the sand had been disturbed overnight and it had to be redone before the concrete could be poured. So again, I don't know if that was the concrete in their yard or the concrete for the supports of the overpass. But so that seemed kind of a perfect place, either one of those, to hide a body. It said that ultimately the parents put a garage on the concrete pad, and I don't know how much time elapsed in between, the pour and the erection of the garage. It would not have been impossible for them to, use ground-penetrating radar or break up the concrete to see if maybe she was under there. Now, I know you wouldn't want to take down a whole overpass, but certainly they could have checked his parents' backyard. So as I was looking for kind of like updated information about the case, I was able to find out that a cold case unit is continuing to work on the case and has recently brought it back into the media. Now, I wasn't sure, but I think it's the State Patrol who is doing that, and not the local Gothenburg police. So they do seem to have a new police chief now. So that's a good thing. I also looked into, what has kind of transpired in the husband's life since this happened. Apparently about a year and a half after he said she ran off with a man to North Platte, he actually divorced her, remarried, and moved to North Platte. Then at some point, he divorced the second wife and married a third wife and moved to Arkansas. Now, there was reports of him having been charged with domestic violence towards the third wife, though I couldn't find any, more details about an outcome or if he was ever actually arrested or just ticketed. I did find a Facebook page for him, and he apparently has now divorced wife number 3, or she divorced him. The kids are grown. He's actually a grandfather now. And as I was kind of going through his page, I have to say it was a little creepy. Like, there's a lot of stuff on there about missing people who died. I did see one reference that said that his father may have passed away, but I don't know. It was just real creepy. There were a lot of posts about dearly departed loved ones. Yeah. I also looked at kind of the terrain around the town, and like I said, it's the downtown portion of this place is like 1 mile by 2 miles, roughly. You know, if there's 12 blocks in a mile, I counted the streets. There's like 12 going one way and 24 going the other way. It's completely surrounded by, just vacant grassland, farmland. There's a river that runs right to the south part of the town. And because the town is so small, like anywhere you are in the town, you're close to the river. There's also a large lake there called Lake Helen. I think it's kind of like a resort. And then if you go to North Platte, where he claims that she went, there are multiple areas, wildlife refuges, state parks with lakes and reservoirs and forests, and I mean, it's just kind of a perfect place, really, to get away with murder. And, the body was never found, so it's not impossible to convict someone of murder without there being a body, because obviously if you're going to kill someone, you're not just going to leave them on the front porch. You're going to try to hide them, but that shouldn't be, a way to have yourself just completely get away with it. Like there should have been a lot more done in this case, in my opinion. So anyway, that's about the extent of what I was able to find out. The State Patrol continues to ask that if anyone has any leads, they contact them. So hopefully the case will be solved and Christi Jo will have justice. Thanks for watching.